From the start of anime history in the early 1900s up through the early 1950s, animation existed mostly as a result of individual animators creating short films out of personal passion for the medium. Plenty of these were adaptations of stories which already existed, and plenty of them were completely original works devised by the artists. But it wasn't until the TV adaptation of Astro Boy in 1963 that anime started being made which based its storyboards directly on the manga source material. This quickly became the most popular method of anime production, with anime adapted directly from manga becoming so commonplace that it became noteworthy when an anime series actually is completely original. Because animation is expensive to produce quickly, it's a lot easier to greenlight a production that's already based on a popular series and which can feed its adaptation success back into the sales of the source material. It also helps that using manga or even light novels as a source material often answers a lot of questions about how to handle the visual presentation of the series. Nevertheless, there are plenty of benefits to production committees creating original works for animation, such as greater creative control over the story and also complete rights to the intellectual property which they generate. It's almost always going to benefit an animation studio more to have a successful original property than to have a successful adaptation, but it also puts a lot more pressure on the studio to create something that people love in order for it to succeed, instead of getting to rely on the built-in audience of a popular IP to cushion their landing. Not long after Mushi Productions started making headway with their TV anime, usually adapted from the works of studio head Tezuka Osamu sensei, Studio Toei, which was on a successful run of yearly film releases mostly adapted from classical stories since the 1950s, started producing original TV shows to compete with Mushi Pro at the start of the 60s. Other studios, including Mushi Pro, were quick to follow, and a lot of focus was put onto shows for children about robot characters that could have toys made out of them. It didn't take long for these robots to start growing huge, and in the early 70s there was a total boom of giant robot anime for kids. During that decade, a team from Mushi Pro had left the studio over disagreement with its creator-based production philosophy, believing that producers should be the central decision makers behind a studio. They went and formed Studio Sunrise, which rapidly expanded throughout the 70s and put their focus onto original giant robot shows that could be marketed with toys. But in 1974, the landscape of original anime would be shaken by the incredible mainstream success of the military space drama Space Battleship Yamato. This story, set mostly on the bridge of a space version of a famous Japanese battleship, led by the charismatic captain that would arguably become anime's first truly iconic original character and be ripped off endlessly in other shows, can practically be thanked for the whole aesthetic and structure of animated sci-fi adventure serials for generations to come. But Yamato wasn't the last original anime to shake the future of the medium. Inspired by its success, animation legend Yoshiyuki Tomino-san pitched his Mobile Suit Gundam show to Studio Sunrise, which released in 1979 and ended up creating the single most enduring original animation franchise of all time. It's hard to consider any original anime to be anywhere near as important as Yamato or Gundam, but out of all the people inspired by those shows directly, there was another creator who would bring original anime to a whole new place in 1995. That, of course, being Anno Hideaki with the creation of the experimental psychological mecha series Neon Genesis Evangelion, the impact of which I covered in my video, How Evangelion Altered Anime Eternally. After that success, the 90s went from being a decade in which Studio Sunrise was doing interesting stuff with original anime to being a decade in which everyone was doing interesting stuff with original anime. Even still, Sunrise seized the moment to prove that they would always be remembered as the absolute gods of original anime by dropping one of the most critically beloved animated shows ever made in 1998 in the form of Cowboy Bebop. If Evangelion represented a turning point for anime on the whole, Bebop represented a turning point for one segment of Studio Sunrise. Keep in mind that by 1996, Sunrise actually consisted of 10 different studios with their own teams, with 90s originals Escaflowne and Cowboy Bebop coming from Studio 2, previously responsible for Gundam creator Tomino's Aura Battler Dunbine and a lot of 80s and 90s Gundam. It was also in the mid-90s that Sunrise was outright purchased by Bandai, and in fact, at the time of of this writing, Studio Sunrise technically doesn't even exist anymore, because it's called Bandai Namco Filmworks now, after all the mergers that have gone down over the past 25 years. You can find infamous stories of the dissatisfaction that animators on the Brave series of mecha shows had felt about the working conditions and creative pressures brought about by the merger. But whether or not that had any direct impact on the decisions made by the Bebop staff, it didn't take long after they had made one of the greatest animated TV shows ever for the team leads of that project to decide that their talents were too big to be contained, and they left to form a new studio that you've very likely become familiar with over the decades, called Studio Bones. While Bones created a completely unremembered original kids series right away, and the adaptation of Clamp's Angelic Lair, and started off working with one foot still back in Studio Sunrise on the co-produced Cowboy Bebop movie, they quickly made their intentions to copy in the madcap experimental original spirit of Evangelion very clear with the production of their own crazy mecha series, Razafon, followed before long by the proper reemergence of the majority of the Bebop team in the creation of head writer Nobumoto Keiko Sensei's Wolf's Rain. Following that up with the well-received adaptation of the scrapped Princess light novel series, as well as the globally beloved Fullmetal Alchemist manga, which I've already covered in the 6th episode of Anime Alphabet, Studio Bones very quickly made a name for themselves as the premier place for action-adventure animation and awesome original content, even when added into adaptations of their work, though that wouldn't stay true for long. The early 2000s ended up being a kind of golden age for original anime, but as someone who got into anime around that time and consumed a whole lot of the stuff getting released, I completely understand what brought this wave to a stop. Anime around this time was very much about creating unique worlds, distinct characters, and creative visual aesthetics, but a lot of the time the stories ended up being pretty much exactly the same. I've watched so many gangs of misfits group up and save the world that the back half in particular of the average adventure show became incredibly predictable and increasingly boring to me. All of these cool settings and characters end up bleeding into one another when all of them reach a point where the characters have nothing to do besides progress the plot forward until enough has been explained that we can justify how they're going to beat the bad guys and save the planet. Every one of these 26-episode adventures ending in a planet-scale threat ended up feeling old hat to me in the face of two anime that came in the mid-2000s, and in my opinion, killed the genre such that nobody would feel the need to attempt it again for a while. If I had to put the pin on it precisely, I'd place it on Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann in 2007 for taking the scale of the standard action-adventure structure to the furthest possible extreme, basically making the act of saving the world look passé by comparison to what its characters accomplish. That show's also incredibly well written and nuanced, and might even be a more directly effective coming-of-age story in the way that it communicates. But I also think that in its punchiness and brevity, it still leaves us room to appreciate a decompressed, full-breathing version of that story, which takes its time to flesh out everything to the most satisfying degree that it can. I think there are lots of great coming-of-age stories in animation, and lots of great original animated stories as well. And so when I say that Eureka 7 is anime's greatest coming-of-age original, I mean it as very high praise. I will get into the bones of everything I think Bones could have done better, and even discuss how the way that it handles its coming-of-age themes makes me consider it a more complete exploration of them than even the more clearly communicated Gurren Lagann. I'm Trixie the Golden Witch. You can find more of my writing on goldenwitch.substack.com, and this is my series of in-depth deep dives on anime classics called Anime Alphabets. Or rather, it would be if I was done writing the video yet. You see, normally I release one of these Anime Alphabet videos once every month, targeting the 4th as a due date. When I picked Eureka 7 for the next episode and marathoned the show with my husband Bird over the course of April, I didn't expect it to end up being much longer than the Fullmetal Alchemist or Legend of Galactic Heroes episodes, and figured I'd be taking a pretty similar approach. Once I started looking into interviews with the creators of the show and dissecting its production background though, I found myself a lot more interested in breaking down the show in extensive depth, simply because I found so much interesting stuff to say, and figured I might as well say as much as I can just to create the ultimate Eureka 7 video. As I got deeper and deeper into writing it, I started to realize that this thing was going to be a lot longer than I'd first thought. By the time I'd finished talking about the first episode, I'd already written about an hour worth of script, but I figured usually I have a lot less to say about about each consecutive episode as I go, since I've laid out so much groundwork at the start. Having said that, Eureka 7 is 50 episodes long. Even touching on an episode for just a few paragraphs is enough to add up very quickly when you've got so many to cover. And as the viewers of my recent Writing About Eureka 7 livestream will have witnessed, I ended up writing 2 whole pages just about episode 19 in the course of that stream, which is hardly one of the more dense episodes of the show. I'll just give it to you straight. I'm literally on page 69, and I just now got to the introduction of Charles and Ray Beams. I know for a fact I'm going to have at least a page of stuff to say about just Charles's favorite song, and so I am not at all exaggerating when I say that this won't just be a book-length analysis, it will be as long as a high fantasy novel. The Asterisk War Sucks video series was just over 50,000 words, and that was a 4-hour-long video. My Eureka 7 script is currently sitting at 43,300 words, and I am only on episode 22! Out of 50! If I was currently making $10,000 a month on Patreon like Noah Caldwell-Gervais, I would have liked to just toil away at this video for the rest of the month and then dropped what I'm currently predicting will be a 6 or 7 hour long video. But right now, I'm poor as fuck, and my husband and I have been busting our asses trying to make enough to get our own place instead of continuing to rely on family. Because I've been putting out videos so frequently and stuffing them with ad breaks, and also streaming regularly and ranting about anything anybody wants in exchange for super chats, I've been making substantially more money through YouTube than I have been through Patreon, or through my rather fledgling Substack account. As such, I simply can't afford to take that long to release something, or even to commit myself to trying to write the video as fast as possible instead of doing live streams, because I need the money from the streams as well. And as that writing stream proved, it slows down the writing process considerably to do that while streaming. Eureka 7 is helpfully broken into 4 arcs, denoted by changes in the opening and ending themes. And in fact, even before I was doing this as a career, the very first time I ever wrote a full series of analytical writing on Eureka 7 back in 2008 on my old blog, I split it into 4 different posts just to manage the project. Because my new video has more to say about just the first episode than that old series did about the entire show, I'm thinking that part 1 will go just to the end of the first episode, not unlike the first part of my video series on Log Horizon. Each of the other 4 parts will then cover one of the arcs in full, and then I will of course release a video with all of the parts in one after it's all complete. In my mind, the best case scenario I can imagine for this video in its final form is netting 500,000 views over the course of probably several years. Eureka 7 is not an extremely popular show and is also 15 years old, being one of the last big shows that aired in 4:3 aspect ratio. I know that a lot of people will check it out because I will be talking about it so much, and I have no doubt that a lot of those viewers will not like the show nearly as much as they expect to, at least until I go in depth on explaining what I think is so special about it. Obviously, I highly encourage you to watch the show if you're interested in it at all, but I also think that this video series will talk about and showcase it in such extreme depth that if you don't like it or don't want to watch the show, but you like my style of analysis, you'll be perfectly fine following what I'm talking about and understanding the plot. After the series of videos on the original series is complete and compiled into the full anime alphabet video, I will take a break from Eureka 7 for a while as per the usual promise to cover the rest of the franchise in its entirety as soon as that video reaches 50,000 views. Of course, if any of these videos hits that view count quickly somehow, I'll jump straight into covering the rest of the franchise accordingly. But I have no way to anticipate how long these videos will take to generate views. Regardless, my intention is to finally complete my old Log Horizon video series once this one is done, in which I will cover the rest of the first and then the second and third seasons, that last one which I haven't even watched yet, so doing Eureka 7 will give me the time to rewatch and catch up on the whole thing. Bird and I have also been watching and loving Little Witch Academia, so if the Eureka 7 videos aren't at 50,000 views by the time I get to the end of the Log Horizon video series, then I will move on to talk about Little Witch Academia next. In the event that those Eureka 7 videos are somehow wildly more successful than I expect, then I may also go straight into covering other important anime of the era which were connected to the production of Eureka 7, such as Razafon, The Mars Daybreak, and Kurao Phantom Memory. But at that point, we're basically fantasizing about a pipe dream where people want to pay me thousands of dollars just to talk about early 2000s anime originals. A girl can dream. Aside from all that, I have a fully recorded 85-minute video comparing the first episodes of Cowboy Bebop and its horrible live-action adaptation by Netflix, which I intend to edit and release very soon, probably either right after the first or second part of the Eureka 7 series. I am thinking that this Cowboy Bebop series will be a bit slower to release, as the cancellation of the Bebop adaptation means that I don't have to worry about it ever coming back up again, and I can really take my time dissecting it in depth, which is not easy because watching it is a serious chore. I have no idea how long that series will end up being in the end, but it will be very, very large. I appreciate that not everyone who watches my videos wants them to be full-on novels, and I love the experience of just marathoning dumb seasonal shows and then scribing out some words on them and editing it the next morning. So if there's a specific show that you think I need to burn through and say some fun words about, by all means, let me know in the comments below. My ability to do this in April was bolstered by the winter season having just wrapped up, and so I covered most of the hyper-popular stuff from recent times. But I know my audience is often more interested in stuff beyond the mainstream, so I need to know everything you want to hear me talk about the most. I won't take about 99% of all the suggestions that I get, so your best bet is always going to be to throw as many ideas at me as possible, as often as possible, if you want a shot at getting my attention. Of course, I'll rant about anything you want me to if you show up to my live streams and make a super chat, support me on patreon.com/goldenwitchfire or goldenwitch.substack.com, or just send me money on PayPal or Cash App or Venmo. I'm at goldenwitchfire, also on all the social media apps, and I'm thanking you again for watching and hoping that you never forget anime forever.